is the most ridiculous thing that was banned at your school? They banned toothpicks and it ended up snowballing into an avalanche of social disorder. In 5th grade, this one kid Kenny enjoyed having a toothpick hanging out of his mouth, a habit he likely picked up from his father or some other adult in his life. I was also in. Kenny one day got this bright idea to soak the toothpicks overnight in various flavorings: vanilla, cinnamon, mint, and so on. He did this only for himself at first, but soon kids started to notice and ask him for a toothpick. Being a natural entrepreneur, he made batches of 10 and 20, wrapped them in aluminum foil, and sold them to kids for a modest cost. Almost instantly, the school banned toothpicks of all kinds. They cited a safety issue, saying that if a kid fell with one in his mouth he could hurt him or herself. This was total and utter nonsense, though, because at the time we played games where we would throw handballs at each other as hard as we could and no one said anything. To boot, this was the 1980s when the notion of playground safety wasn't even conceived. There was a metal rocket on the playground made of tubes that stood at least 12 feet high and at an angle so that if you fell out of the top, you fell right down onto the concrete. No one said anything about safety. But now, you see, the toothpicks were contraband and everything had changed. Kenny himself saw demand skyrocket and he soon cranked up his production. He hired runners and even street-level dealers, I was one of these, to sell to the kids as they got off the buses in the morning and during recess. Imagine it, kids with small bundles of flavored toothpicks tucked into their waistbands, furtively exchanging these small packets for money. But things got even worse, and it shocks me to this day that the school officials were so oblivious to what was going on. There were almost weekly announcements about this trade, but for every worsening warning from the school, the prices just went up and business got better. They were giving us the best advertisement we could imagine by telling the whole school that we existed and that it was forbidden. It didn't take long for new suppliers to pop up, each with their system of distribution and sales. There was one main rival who was smart and had novel flavors like cinnamon, and there were ragtag operations with poor quality and poor logistical control. But of course, it was inevitable that Kenny and his rival would begin to step on each other's toes. As I said, this was a small town, tiny in fact by most measures, with around 5,000 people in it and with nothing but even smaller towns around it and at some distance away. There were only 2 schools in town. One building housed 1st, 8th and the other just down the road was the high school. This toothpick cartel stretched down to 2nd and 3rd grade. We had almost literal babies on the streets selling contraband. And there were rumors that kids in the high school were flavoring toothpicks too, but we never got confirmation on that. But as winter set in, the competition turned violent. We were scrawling maps of the front and back recess yards and fighting over territory. We used fists, pine cones, snowballs, rocks, and anything we could find. The school in its infinite wisdom kept harping on the toothpicks, but by then we knew they were toothless. The school would rotate kids from the backyard to the front yard to the backyard depending on their grade. But one day every kid defied this system and all went to the front where the bus circle was. Pretty much every grade school kid was out there in one of 2 large groups that were circling each other, thirsty for something. We were just grade school kids, bear in mind. We didn't know what we were doing. The teachers and school officials were freaking out though. Vastly outnumbered, they shouted at us and tried to break up our groups, but they were powerless and they had acted too late. Luckily for them, only a few actual fights broke out. It was mostly just saber rattling. Over the weekend we all met with our respective gangs and drew up our battle plans. I remember clearly Kenny meeting with me and a few select people in his organization. I had become one of Kenny's lieutenants and I commanded the very lucrative strip of land behind the bus circle near a line of trees that kids hid in. He had a map written in a sloppy ballpoint pen on a torn out sheet of lined notebook paper. Near the side of the bus circle, our rivals had been building a snow bunker and dealing out of the bunker, out of sight of the recess monitors. I was to lead an assault on this bunker. I was almost queasy at the prospect of battle. You see, I wasn't a soldier. But Kenny was smart, he assigned a kid much larger than me to my details. He was my soldier. He was my muscle. But the school had the weekend for battle plans of its own and the mass gathering on Friday must have scared some sense into them. When we got to school on Monday, they informed us that recess was cancelled. Martial law was in full effect. We were to rotate in and out of the cafeteria and return to our classrooms with our food. We were on lockdown. Immediately after the announcement declaring martial law, Kenny and his rival were called into the principal's office. He had a few disciplinary run-ins before these events and they must have pressured him to end it somehow, though they took no direct disciplinary action against him or his rival. I think they might have feared reprisal. Kenny still dealt for a while. I think he genuinely enjoyed flavored toothpicks, but now at a ridiculous price and only directly to people he knew and trusted. It didn't take long for it to peter out and vanish completely.